Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
The Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and as always, we're going to start our session with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build, together with a people of goodwill, the civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Today, I'm thrilled to present Sarah St. Onge. She's a board member of Save the One. That's Rebecca Kiessling's organization. She's a Christian wife, mother, and writer, and she writes about child loss, grief, and issues pertaining to continuing a pregnancy after a lethal anomaly has been diagnosed. Her blog is www.shebringsjoy.com. Welcome, Sarah. Nice to finally talk to you.
Yes, very nice. Thank you so much.
Sarah's a very busy mom, and she and I, we're both very busy doing our volunteer work on the side of mothering and career work, and it was difficult to find a time we're both free, and I hope that we can remain free for this hour. If not, we'll have to do this interview in pieces, but let's do our best to do that. So when did you get involved in talking about this, Sarah? Child loss.
Well, when it kind of branched out of when I lost my daughter was 2010, December, and I started writing almost immediately. You know, everybody started the little blogger blogs, and it's when everybody really exploded with their the group dynamics on social media and stuff. So I started out very small, just doing it more for support. I believe it was 2012. The beginning of 2012, maybe, when I reached out to Rebecca Kiessling with Save the One. I could be a little off on the date because I had started noticing a lot of families facing the same diagnosis that my daughter had or other similar diagnoses, the poor treatment that they were getting from doctors and other medical professionals in terms of mostly those families who wanted to try to intervene and, quote-unquote, not let nature take its course. And so I really decided that this was something that I really felt very strongly about, and it's an ethical issue that I just really I wanted to learn more about. Through that, I also am friends with Cheryl Crozier, who works with her son Simon. She started the organization Simon's Law. So, and this is what I talk about. This is just what I do, and so I've been writing. I've written a few articles here and there for some bigger publications and things, and I'm trying to put a human face on the stories that's not coming, the face on, in Time magazine that gives an explanation for all the reasons you should not have a baby who is going to die after they're born.
Right, right. Yes, that is the poster child. In fact, I just did a podcast about Down syndrome and how that was used. That diagnosis was used as a wedge to open the door to abortion in the first place. It was seen as life-saving to do prenatal diagnosis because then we could just get the babies that we want to abort, not the healthy babies. And of course, that's very offensive to those of us who love children with Down syndrome or any disability. But it was used as a wedge issue because everyone knows that you wouldn't want to give birth to a child with anything like that wrong with them. So, I totally relate to that. That's what got me into blogging in 2006. Somebody ought to say something about this. And then you click that, start a blog button, and life is never the same. But it's a blessing that there are these advocates out there like you, Sarah, because those of us when my daughter was born in 2002, if you Googled Down syndrome, all you got was how to abort. My poor dad came to me with a folder full of things. He was so proud. He printed off the internet, and I almost cried in his face. Like, what are you doing? Do you realize what you have here? He didn't mean that, but that's all we had. So we've changed the landscape, we parents, and it's a wonderful thing. So I want to focus on that. Would you tell us the story of your daughter?
Yeah, so my husband and I have a blended family, and I have one older son, and he has two older children. We had already had one child together, and we realized, that we were expecting another one. Very happy, excited to welcome a new member of our family, and they actually started noticing problems right away. When I was 9 weeks pregnant, and I went in for a checkup, they did an ultrasound, and they said, well, you're miscarrying this baby. It's, this pregnancy is not viable. It's not going to last. And I made the, because I refuse to accept anything that anybody tells me, I said, well, I'm just going to wait and see.
Good for you.
Yeah, we still had a heartbeat, and that was my whole, is there still a heartbeat? Then we're going to keep going. That was my whole, my stand, that was where I stood on it. So They said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and schedule, I'm sure you know, the nucleofold translucency for your 12 weeks. And if you're still pregnant, you can go to that appointment. Well, I was still pregnant. And the problem that they saw at the 9-week ultrasound was not apparent anymore. Now there was, but she did have a very thickened nucleofold translucency. So they said, okay, obviously there's something genetic going on here. She has some kind of trisomy disorder, something along those lines. And that doctor was slightly more positive because he assumed the most likely culprit, in this was Down syndrome, that he couldn't see any other issues that made him think it might be something more at that point. So we, my husband and I sat in the car, and, there was no real decision-making to be had. We would welcome any child, and we actually were a little more on the excited. We felt more that at this point, if this was the case, it was more of a gift than anything else. And I do know the realities. I have a cousin.
Well, that's unusual, Sarah. I must say, most parents are still feeling sorry for themselves at that point. I certainly was in the why me phase. God bless you. That's wonderful.
Can I tell you what my husband said his first thought was?
No.
His first thought when he found out that there was a good possibility was that he couldn't wait to be a Special Olympics dad.
Oh, that's beautiful.
He was just that was his overriding thought, in the whole early part of the process. So because they did see problems, though, and this is normal in pregnancies with this kind of issue, we had what most people think of their gender reveal scan. It's actually the fetal anomaly, the fetal anatomy scan. And they're looking for defects. They're not trying to see what sex your baby is.
No.
They want to see if there's something wrong with your baby. And when they start seeing problems earlier, they do that at 16 weeks so that you can swim in under those termination points if you want to. So
that's exactly. I always say that. Yeah, and how does that work with the amnio? We want to go through it step by step so people understand how the whole thing works, because you've got good insight into this.
Yeah. Well, we did choose to have an amnio, and I don't have any gripe if somebody chooses to do that. Our reason being was that we were being seen by two doctors at that point, my regular OBGYN, where I would do my, my urine tests and all that kind of stuff, and then this maternal fetal medicine doctor who was the specialist. He did the high-level ultrasounds and things like that. Our reasoning was because we were so assured that this baby that we were expecting was going to have Down syndrome, we wanted to be sure because we wanted to be ready for any situations that would arise. I want to be very clear.
Sarah, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the medical technology in itself.
Oh, yeah. It's just when it's not
completely morally neutral. It's how we use it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like saying, diabetes medication is wrong. No, it's not. Any medication is intended for good initially, and many of them can be misused, like anything, like any technology, right?
Yeah, no, most definitely. So we had our fetal anatomy scan at 16 weeks, and we did have the amnio at 16 weeks. And when they did the anatomy scan, before he even did the amnio, he said he saw other birth defects that had not been apparent at 12 weeks because she was too small. She had an omphalocele, it's when the baby's abdominal organs, in the very beginning of a pregnancy, your baby's intestines and sometimes the baby's liver, but mostly intestine, is actually in the base of the umbilical cord. And then about 5 weeks, that goes back into the baby's belly, and it seals up, and the umbilical cord is formed. Well, when a baby has an omphalocele, that doesn't happen. The organs don't go back in. And the umbilical cord, it's actually, as funny as it is, it's the abdominal wall defect, but it's actually a defect of the umbilical cord to form properly. So she had these defects. Yeah, she had this on the outside of her belly. That in conjunction with the thickened nuchal fold translucency, that day we received a tentative diagnosis of trisomy 13. That's what he assumed.
Trisomy 13. Okay. Okay. So for our listeners that don't understand, Sarah, trisomy 13 is?
It's the same type of disorder as trisomy 21, Down syndrome, but instead of the 21st chromosome, it's on the 13th chromosome. And unfortunately, babies with trisomy 13 and trisomy 18, which is another trisomy, one of those are the top three that you'll see, don't have as good life expectancy as a baby with trisomy 21 Down syndrome.
No, the lower the number of the trisomy of the chromosome that's tripled, the more severe. Am I right?
Yeah, because it affects more areas. It's more widespread. I mean, the trisomy affects every, all of your cells, but it's more widespread throughout the body. The one thing that I have to say is that what's funny about this is because I had already looked at translucency, I had researched what disorders this could be. So what's funny is I had already looked up trisomy 13 and trisomy 18 and trisomy 21 and, triploidy and every single, because I'm that type of person. I looked up every disorder I could think of. And I had found, I'm the eternal optimist, I had found, I'm sure you know her as well, Teresa and her daughter who has trisomy 13 and Patau syndrome, and she really gave me a lot of information, making me realize that this may not be as dire as it could be if that was the case. So we went to this is one of the little black humor moments of this whole fiasco. We just learned that this baby is most likely not going to survive. He gave her a definitive incompatible with life diagnosis. We didn't know her sex because her body was the omphalocele was so large they could not see her genitals. So at this point, but we had our amnio because we still wanted to know. And we're sitting in the geneticist's office, and you can tell, first of all, that she's not accustomed to people wanting to actually sit down with her after this has happened.
Usually it's sort of a foregone conclusion, right, Sarah? That, like, what's there to discuss?
That we're going to terminate. Okay, let's make an appointment. But so she's sitting there, and we're trying to tell her, well, what is this? And she can tell, I'm assuming by the questions that we're asking at this point, we've made it clear we're not going to terminate, and we're asking with intention to bring the baby home. And she just finally looks at me, and she says, this baby's never going to come home. And if she survives, or if the baby survives outside of the hospital, the baby's going to an institution. And I kid you not, it was, like I said, moment of black humor. I had this thought process that somewhere in some dreary, dark, rainy place, there was like an institution, with like Victorian-looking women walking around taking care of all these babies. Because I'm like, what institution is going to take an infant? What is an institution going to be able to do better than I'm going to be able to do at home? Seriously.
Good for you.
Like, this is so ridiculous. But I just went back for one more appointment with him. got a fetal, and then we got a fetal echocardiogram, find out that her heart was fine. Everything was, physically fine. Then we get back our amnio results and find out that she has no genetic defects. There's nothing wrong.
Wow.
It is a physical formation, something in her very, very early, probably about 5 or 6 weeks pregnant. There was either, they don't know what causes it. It's called limb-body wall complex or a body stalk anomaly, and it's when, in fetal development, when there's that little, the fetus really goes from a blastocyst and it kind of looks like a worm. That was the point of impact, so to speak, where the problem started.
Okay.
And it's some kind of disruption in the formation that causes. It's essentially like the center of the baby's body doesn't. There's 4 corners that kind of fold in. They didn't fold in properly. So a lot of these babies are born with very different types of defects, but it's all midline defects, facial clefts. The abdominal defects, there can be spina bifida, leg and arms can be missing, and it is considered uniformly lethal. There are anecdotal survival stories, which goes into the next part of this. My daughter had the most minimal case to qualify for this particular disorder.
Okay.
So we were very intent that she be given all the care that she needed.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor that we were seeing said, I have never had a patient carry to term for any defect in New York. So
for any defect?
He had never had no.
You mean not even Down syndrome or?
No.
Wow. Listen to that, folks. The doctor has 100% abortion rate for any kind of defect found in amnio.
This is Westchester, New York, and I'm obviously not going to give the name of the doctor, but he is on one of the top 10 rated doctors in Westchester, New York.
Oh, yeah. So when you have a prenatal diagnosis and you have an absolutely flabbergasted doctor, don't be surprised, especially on the East or West Coast, I would imagine.
Yeah, he gave us a recommendation for another doctor that he thought we may have more luck with. And
was he not willing to work with you as an obstetrician?
He was very uncomfortable, and he actually did more. What we had planned was doing a co-care with our OBGYN and him, and the OBGYN would ultimately be the one who would deliver the baby. Being that we thought the baby had Down syndrome, she felt comfortable with that, and we were going to go with her depending on how the baby's heart looked. When it came to be obvious that this baby had very serious problems, he did not feel comfortable working in conjunction with the OBGYN. We had to find a specialist to deliver, and we had to have the baby at a bigger hospital. We couldn't have the baby at our regular county hospital. This was all lengthily drawn out. I'm shortening it quite a bit, but he just did not feel comfortable, and he made that very clear and very apparent.
Do you think it has something to do with fear of liability? I know the obstetricians labor under a lot of pressure when it comes to lawsuits. They have very high, malpractice premiums.
It might have been, but I would guess that the situation had more to do with the fact that I was actually delivering the child, being that when we had started looking at all this and during the course of this, and I want to be clear, because I'm not writing this down, some of my events may be slightly out of order because I'm going back and forth a little bit. But at one point when I said, well, I'm going to deliver this child and I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy, what are my chances of getting a C-section? Because I did not want, by this time I had actually there's quite a large group of moms with babies with omphaloceles on Facebook, and I had made contact with them, and they had, actually this was Yahoo, this was even before the Facebook groups, there was a Yahoo group, and they had said, deliver the baby. If the baby has a very large one, you have to deliver the baby via C-section so that the baby doesn't get hurt. And, they gave me a lot more specific reasons. And he looked at me and said, I am not going to scar a perfectly healthy uterus for a baby that's just going to die.
Ooh, ouch.
So, yeah, so he... So that was that, and so we so
you were searching for a doctor, and how far along were you in your pregnancy?
By that point, I was almost 20 weeks, about 20 weeks. So we went to an appointment with one doctor. This was in Westchester again. And this female doctor told me that we walk in. The place was filthy. I'll tell you something I found about the place later. The place was filthy. She didn't have any of my charts, nothing, none of my paperwork, nothing. She had nothing. She didn't know. She sat there and lectured my husband and I about how I explained the situation. And she started lecturing my husband and I how if she didn't care what the amnio said, with the defects she saw, this baby had a genetic disorder. She didn't care about, and I'm like, we had a microarray done. We had the most up-to-date testing. Now, I'm sure in the future there's going to be something even more detailed, but right now we've had it all done. There's nothing genetically visible, but she insisted, and then she proceeded to say, and I actually have this written down, but I don't have the papers right in front of me. She proceeded to say, she looked at me and she said, she waited till my husband left the room. He had to go use the bathroom, or I don't know what he had to do, but he left the room. She looks at me and she says, the only way that I'm going to take on your care is if you agree not to pursue any heroic measures when this baby is born. She said, I think it takes a lot, and excuse my language, I know that this is but I think this brings the full effect of what she was saying and how we were treated. I think it takes a lot of balls to look at a little tiny baby that's 10 times smaller than the adult that's standing over them who supposedly loves them to do these treatments. And the wording is a little, but that was pretty
You mean she didn't have the guts to do the heroic treatments once the baby was born?
She would not do anything. Nope. She said no.
Because why?
I
don't understand. Because it's hard to watch?
She felt that it was morally reprehensible for parents to try heroic treatments for their children, heroic measures.
But that's so backwards.
It is so backwards. Well, I found out later, and I found out later that this particular doctor's office actually does do late-term abortions.
Well, there you go. How on earth did you get referred to her?
Yeah. I did,
Imagine how many normal babies she probably had to put to death because they survived the abortion. Because a lot of times they just do early labor and the baby survives.
Yeah.
So if she's used to letting babies die on the table, she wasn't going to go above and beyond to save your baby because, after all, she wasn't perfect. She wasn't. Whoa. See, that's what happens to the entire medical profession. When you allow late-term abortions, every life is cheapened. Every life. Yeah. Every life is cheapened. And this is what Governor Northam of Virginia was talking about, right? That little conversation after the baby's born. Can you go through that? Can you remind us of what he said, Governor Northam?
Well, Northam, he was in a radio interview, and he was most likely talking about, I think we can concede that he was talking about a baby with some kind of birth defect. He wasn't talking about a fully formed
No. He's talking about a baby, right. Right.
Yeah, we have to concede some of these things because sometimes people make them out to be a lot more scandalous than they are, and I think that weakens what we're trying to say when we.
I think it's pretty much understood that he's talking about a baby who has an anomaly.
And he was talking about whether it was going to be up to the parents to decide whether or not to resuscitate the baby, and which is horrible. It's just horrible.
No, actually, he talked about decide if they resuscitate and then making the baby comfortable
make the decision,
while they make a further decision. And that's what scared me, because is he really talking about actually giving lethal injection or withholding food and water? I wasn't
and that's
sure.
The thing, and it's hard because they talk about a lot of the food and water, and that's a big, for obvious reasons, that's a big question back and forth. When the baby is facing a lethal anomaly, a lot of times when it's very serious and it's very apparent, they're going to die immediately. My daughter died within 2 hours of birth, and we did intervene. We did finally find a way to intervene. There were still issues that I have, but the problem is that sometimes if it's going to happen so quickly and it's really apparent, my daughter had pulmonary hypoplasia. Her lungs were not working. She was
suffocating from the moment she was born.
Suffocating from the moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But if they would have started, it's a procedure, it's a medical procedure to start food and water and do all these things. So sometimes, and I think that's a hard point that the pro-life movement, I know sometimes people accuse or they'll say, I'll say something on social media, and people will become very offended at the things but I've been through this, and I understand somewhat what some parents, there are situations where nothing is going to help the baby. I know for a fact nothing was going to save my daughter's life. Okay, and the only reason I don't describe in a little more graphic detail what actually happened is honestly because I don't want to give power to pro-choice people to say, look, she wasn't suffering. We made sure of that. But the perception that they could take, if I really went into detail about everything that would happen, they would be able to make that argument or that accusation that I was an awful person or my husband and I made the wrong choice, because they would perceive the story that I was telling as talking about her suffering. So I try to be very cautious not to go into the gory details of everything, but she was not suffering. And that's the thing that people don't realize. Palliative care is available to small children or to neonates who are born with serious birth defects who cannot be treated. So there is no suffering after a baby is born. They are given.
Thank you.
They are given.
Thank you for clarifying that. And explain the concept of neonatal hospice.
Well, neonatal hospice is when fortunately, most hospitals have some type of hospice program at this point. Most of the larger, city hospitals, I know New York City, we delivered actually at Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital in New York City. They did not have a hospice program at that time. And just to give an example, I delivered out 34 weeks, and my daughter lived for 2 hours after she was born, or an hour and 47 minutes we got with her, and all of my paperwork said miscarriage instead of her name. And I had 34 weeks, and she was born alive.
Why?
So that was what they were prepared for. I'm just giving a comparison. That's what they were
ahead of time. They were prepared for her to be born dead?
No, I'm saying the hospital overall was just prepared to treat women when they had miscarriages, and they tried very hard.
So they had no provision for that.
No. Now, what perinatal hospice does is it's actually the same exact situation of hospice as when, you have a loved one dying of cancer. It's very holistic. They work with your medical team, your clergy people, a social worker, making sure that it takes a lot of the stress off of the parents to allow them to parent the child that they're expecting to the extent that they can. It's a gift of time is what the perinatal hospice founder calls it's a gift of time. It gives parents the time to be able to bond with their child and make plans and make memories. And but it's interdisciplinary team that comes in and works.
So tell us what that looks like. What is it actually? The gift of time. What are you able to do with your daughter? What were you able to do with your daughter?
Well, we did not have hospice. I can tell you what it looks like from the outside, but we unfortunately did not have a hospice program.
That's right. That's right.
What hospice does is they'll do things such as first of all, they'll streamline your appointments, make sure you're not spending weeks and weeks at a time, 4 days out of the week in the doctor's office. These types of pregnancies do require, obviously, more medical care. You're seeing more often. They will make sure that when you're getting your appointments, maybe they do their pap smears. It's little things. Maybe your OBGYN's office does all their pap smears in the morning and they don't see prenatal clients till after 10 o'clock or after 11. So your appointment will be scheduled before 11 o'clock so you're not having to sit in the waiting room with a bunch of pregnant women.
Oh, because that would be so hard,
Yeah, to be delivering healthy babies. They're going to make sure every single piece of paperwork you had in that doctor's office says that you are expecting a baby who's not most likely going to live. And we always say most likely. There's always miracles. But that's right. In the doctor's office that you're going to get the same nurse and the same doctor every time so that there's a continuity of care. You're going to get the same teams. Everybody on it's going to be a team effort that everybody is equally working on to help make sure that you are able to focus all of your attention on that baby and how you're going to deliver safely, the safest way for both people. On the peripheral, there is the delivery team is going to be given probably a little more detailed birth plan. And unlike some stories where you hear that birth plans can be ignored by doctors or, a doctor always has prerogative to make sure everybody's safe. So they're not obligated to follow anybody's birth plan. But if you're expecting a baby that is, if you're delivering a baby who's not expected to die, it's going to be more likely that you're going to be able to have special circumstances of extra people in the room with you when you deliver the baby, things like that. As long as mom's safety is paramount, everybody being safe, they're going to arrange for photographers to come in and take care of you. They also have what's really neat, and we did not have this, and I would have given anything to have this. Now, this is going to sound morbid to some people, but it's really not. They have they're baby bassinets. They look like Moses baskets, and they actually have cooling packs in them so that you can still room in with your baby if your baby doesn't survive very long. And, it sounds morbid, but I'll give you my example. I handed my daughter back to the nurse probably about 2 hours after she had passed away, and I did not know until the day I left the hospital that she was sitting in a cooler down in the basement of the hospital. And I did not know, number one, that she was alone sitting there. They didn't dress her. She was just in a bin. And I didn't know that I could have asked to hold her again. And
yet if your other relative had died, all this would have been covered, right? You would have known what was happening.
You would have known what was happening. You would have had the time to go. I mean, can you
Family members could have come. Yeah.
Yeah, and could have come and seen, and that's what happens with hospice because it's in, and they do, they tend to do them more. They try to do planned deliveries so that grandparents can be there, and aunts and uncles. If people are going to be traveling in, depending on obviously, again, everything I'm saying is based on if the mom and baby, but mom is safe. It has to be a safe delivery. But anything within those confines. They really try to work and give you the experience that you want to have with your baby because this is the only shot you're going to get.
Yeah.
They want to make sure
you mentioned clergy. Your baby can be baptized immediately.
Well, that's exactly. Your baby can be baptized. Your baby, everything that you would normally do, and it gives you the opportunity to make sure the social worker will help you talk through and figure out what type of memories that you want to have. What do you want to do? I have a T-shirt that every single one of my kids has worn, throughout the years. I wish I would have thought to bring it to the hospital to put it on my daughter because then every one of my kids, there's little, and it's like the size of my 6-year-old wears it now, but, I would have stuck it on her just so I could say, yes, she wore it too. That's the kind
and they do little casts of their feet, like little plastic casts of the feet.
We have her feet. My husband, well, I have to tell you, we did end up lucking out in memory items because my husband went, while I was still in the hospital, my husband went, we actually lived on the corner from a funeral home. We didn't know, neither one of us had, at that time both of my parents were still living, and his mom was, his mom was still alive then, and we didn't know anything about burying people. We had no experience with it, so he just went down there and walked in, and, he explained to the gentleman what happened, and the gentleman looked at him from across the table and said, you didn't think of terminating the pregnancy? My husband said he almost stood up. Well, wait, almost stood up and walked out. He said he wanted
I would have.
Then my husband, but this is where you find, my husband said, no, we didn't, and he gave him a hug. His wife had carried a baby to term a year before who had a very serious case of spina bifida who lived for a very short time as well.
So he was just shocked that someone else had done it. He was just shocked that someone else had done it.
Yeah, and he also knew exactly the things they had. They were at Yale New Haven, and they had a hospice program available for them. So he knew the things that we would want to have. He made sure we got her handprints and footprints. He made sure that him and my husband took casts of her feet They couldn't get her hands. She, like I said, she had some problems, but they got her little feet casts. He did everything he could. He replicated everything that he could as far as memory-making items that he had done for him and his wife at Yale New Haven for us, so that we had.
That's wonderful. What a blessing. Yeah, funeral directors can be really beautiful. Oh, that's wonderful. So he was present at the birth.
No, he was not present at No, he was not. My husband went while I was still recuperating in the hospital and said, "I don't know what to do." And he said, and he explained the situation to him, and then he started talking to him. No, he was not there at the birth, but he was definitely there afterwards. And anytime, and he waited about a month and a half after I got home and I delivered her. He called me and he said, "I have something down here for you." And he said, "And I didn't want to call you out of your house." He said, "But my wife, these are the clothes that she was wearing. They had put her in one of the hospital nappy things to her transport when they brought her from the hospital. And he had saved all of her clothing and her hat and everything that she had come to him in. And he had put them aside for me. He didn't give them to me right away. He said they were covered. He said there's a lot of blood and stuff on them that his wife had. She didn't want to clean it because it still smelled like the baby, but she didn't want to give it back to me when it was full of blood and body fluids. And so she cleaned it as best she could without cleaning it too much. And he was very kind. So you find little people here and there, but the hospice. I mean, I'm pretty sure that at this point most large hospitals, and especially in cities, have hospice programs. And there is so much information now available online, and there is so much social connection through social media that it would be hard-pressed at this point to find a family that would not be able to, even if they couldn't get an official hospice team for themselves, I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't be able to cobble something together when they receive their diagnosis through their hospital social. I guarantee you they show their hospital social worker just the perinatal hospice website, and the social worker would be able to handle these things.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Very accessible, I think, at this point, yeah.
So, okay, if you're talking to a mother who's got a child with a similar diagnosis, a similar prognosis, what would you say to her to convince her that it's a better option to do what you did versus what her doctor is probably encouraging her to do, abort? Why would that be a better option?
Well, the first thing I would do would be to listen to her fears, because a lot of those decisions that we make about things like this are made out of fear. The two biggest fears are my baby is suffering, and I can't handle this.
Right.
And that the baby suffering is a valid concern for any mother. A lot of these mothers who terminate believe that they're doing the right thing for their baby because they view what they're doing as sacrificial because their baby is suffering. So so I would listen first, and I would take the cues from what the mother was saying about her fears, and I would answer her fears in a way that hopefully would assuage them. And I actually, for this particular situation, I am more apt, and I always recommend using the types of arguments you use against euthanasia or assisted suicide rather than abortion arguments.
Okay.
Because the reality is the woman that's doing this is not terminating her pregnant like somebody getting a typical abortion.
Right. She never thought she'd be in this situation.
No, and she sees herself, what she's being told by doctors, and this is what doctors are saying to her, and I'm telling you this word for word, is she is removing her child from life support. So you need to...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you are removing your child from life support, and you are letting them go, and you are doing the right thing for them. That is what
meaning the mother's body is life support.
Yes, and that's all she's doing.
Yeah.
Babies, and part of that is like, the whole thing is the baby alive? Is the baby, so you're not, it's very hard because it's a completely different dynamic than any other conversation about abortion, I think. So that would be first. It's very, as far as a woman being worried about pain and suffering, there's two answers to that. They can have it one way or the other. Either fetuses feel pain or they don't feel pain. They need to make a decision because when it comes to every other abortion, supposedly the babies don't feel any pain. But when it comes to these, they're in pain and we need to terminate the pregnancies. It doesn't work both ways. So
right,
that's
exactly. I mean, yeah, we've pretty much determined that by that stage of pregnancy, they're capable of feeling pain. Yeah. So to say that abortion is painless but birth is not, it doesn't make. You're right. It makes no sense at all.
It doesn't make sense. There are ways to make sure that the baby is not in any distress. They can do fetal stress tests. There's a ton of different things that if a mother needs reassurance, and in this type of situation, most doctors would be more than happy to do these things for her. As far as her own mental health and her own issues, I always recommend looking through, just perusing through the frequently asked questions page on the perinatal hospice website, because she has gathered a significant number of studies, and the majority of studies that are done on perinatal hospice show it to be a very positive choice and option for parents. In addition, for what I've read, and I usually check it maybe once every 2 or 3 months, I'll go and read through to see if anything new has been added, and it's usually her speaking now, but the studies that have been done of families who have made the decision to continue a pregnancy after they have faced the prenatal diagnosis show that the women who choose to continue pregnancies have better mental health outlooks than those who choose to terminate.
Say that again. Repeat that, please. I want people to hear that.
Well, women who choose to continue a pregnancy after a poor prenatal diagnosis have a better mental health outlook than those who terminate. You are not helping a woman by telling her she should terminate a pregnancy. So when you think as a pro-life person, you're sitting back and saying, I can't make a decision. I don't want my friend to suffer. You're causing her more suffering ultimately in the long run. That causes more mental health problems. It causes a more intense grieving process. It causes a more lengthy grieving process. And funny thing was, there was one study that she has up there that they did that shows that when you would think that all these great, the new NIPT, the testing and everything that can check it out by 10 weeks would make it better because she could just have an abortion earlier. It actually shows that some of those processes are even worse when the woman has the information earlier in the pregnancy than later in the pregnancy.
Wow. Did she say why? I'd love to see that. That's fascinating.
What if? I'll find the link and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do. I'll post it.
That one, I think it was like the whys of the whole what could have happened. So many unanswered questions. And the thing is, and that's
because, of course, people are pushing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, too, is this is from a purely anecdotal perspective. It's just me. This isn't any study now. I'm just going to be honest. There's not any more why questions when you choose to continue or any fewer why questions. Do you even carrying to term? Okay, what is the end result of terminating and carrying to term when you have a baby with a lethal anomaly? The babies are both dead.
Right.
So you're not changing anything about what's going to happen with the baby. And I hate to sound blunt, but that's the reality.
No, that's true.
That's the blunt reality. Baby's dead either way. Okay, so there's that. Number two, you don't know why anything happened, and you're going to question yourself regardless. You're going to question yourself and every decision, every food you ate, the exercise that you did when you were early. Oh, my gosh, I went to the dog show. I must have caught something. Everything you did, you're still going to question. You're going to wonder.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That's not none of the things that are specific to carrying to term or to terminating the pregnancy change except for the fact that you are stepping in and intervening. That's the only change that you're making.
That's right. That's right.
So you're not stopping a woman. Everybody, I see a lot of pro-choice people. Well, then she doesn't have to deliver a dead child, or she doesn't have to. That's a whole other issue. She's not going to have to suffer through losing a child. She is losing a child.
That's right. They're trying to pretend that abortion but they can't admit there's a consequence to abortion in itself, that there's grieving, and they're in big denial over that there's grieving and guilt and anniversary depression and trauma. And so it's built on a lie that it's easier to abort. than to give.
Because they gaslight. They gaslight. Yep. I just wrote about that. I actually wrote about that on mine. It's a whole gas. They make a lot of money off of it, the big names. I'm not talking about the average woman who's fighting for it. I think the average woman sitting out there who's not making any money and who's arguing with people on Twitter, 90% of them, I guarantee you, have had abortions and they feel guilty. Yeah. I'm going to be blunt. I don't know if you looked at my stuff. I'm also post-abortive. Mm-hmm. I had one when I was 19. So I do know what, in that context, what I'm talking about as well.
Right, of course. Did that make you more combative when it came to abortion, Sarah?
Oh, yes. At the time, I was very, no, because I actually had some follow-up situations very shortly after I had one that really rocked my, I found out, I told an aunt about it shortly after I had it because I was just a mess. And for some reason, she talked to my grandmother, and my grandmother felt the need to tell me that she had to, her words were, pull my mom out of a clinic because I was going to be terminated. And I don't know whether that's hyperbole. I doubt. This was in California. I doubt they would have allowed her in. If anything, she probably locked her in her room. I don't think she went into a doctor's office and pulled my mom out of it.
Yeah.
But the fact that I had almost been victim of the same fate that I had chosen for somebody else really, and even then, like I've talked to Rebecca a lot about it, even then I was still in that mindset because I came from a very personally pro-life, publicly pro-choice family. They were my, which is funny because I don't want to talk negatively, but I found out over the years, as I've shared my information and my stories, we've had quite a few babies lost to abortion in my family.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's hopefully we'll see them one day again.
Yes. Yes.
But it's just it really, even then it was very hard. You have that when you're taught constantly, it's somebody else's choice, it's their choice. Even then, for myself, I was horrified and I was wrecked. But even then, you would not have got me to say that we need to go out and stop this from happening because I felt that this was not my right to be telling people what to do. I could change hearts and minds, but legislatively, then no way, because women would be dying in back alleys, and anything's better than dead women, and I bought into the whole thing. I was in Southern California in the 90s. It was just So, but as I grew older, things changed, and obviously by the time I got pregnant with my daughter, things had changed drastically because I was like, no, this is not happening, and. I don't want to say I don't want to conflate the two situations, but it is a little bit redemptive there, And they're not.
I was just going to ask you that the fact that you fought so hard to give her every chance at life. What was your daughter's name? Beatrix. That you tried to give Beatrix every chance at life despite all the odds against her. I'm sure that does. Did you ever see the movie Bella?
Yes, I did.
So Eduardo Verásteg's character has killed a little girl in an accident, and he saves the life of a little girl whose mother is abortion-minded, and that gives him a sense of redemption. I think that can be a very healing moment, in our lives. And there are many people like Abby Johnson who had 2 abortions that is working to make abortion unthinkable. So I think it's a beautiful gift. As Christians, we have the idea of redemption. We're in Lent now. We're heading towards Easter. Our Lord's death made up for our sins. So certainly we can imitate him in the making up for ours. Of course, only he can erase our sins, but we can imitate him in suffering and making sacrifice for the lives of others. And it's a beautiful thing that nobody needs to ever suffer from ever having had an abortion for the rest of their lives. There's forgiveness and healing. Did you go to any kind of a retreat, Rachel's Vineyard, or anything like that, Sarah?
No, I have not done anything like that. I think that mine, it comes from talking about, trying to write about things and talking about. I don't know that I'm a little bit of a I'm a little bit of a introverted person. I don't know that I would feel too comfortable sitting and doing like group sharing and sitting and talking in a group. I think that if I were ever to pursue any type of counseling for something like that, I might have to do it very privately because...
Oh, that's another beautiful way to do it. I have a friend who does Rachel's Vineyards. I've had 3 miscarriages myself. She encouraged me to go because I lost children. And in her view, I don't know if this is the entire thing, but the most important thing happens when you're alone with God in your room, and you spiritually hold that child and apologize to that child and just nurture that baby in your heart. That's where a lot of the work takes place. But again, there probably is some sharing. But that, for me, things like that, I went to masses like that for aborted, miscarriage, stillbirth, and it gave me a chance to name my children and to love them, to tell them I love them and that I miss them and to offer them back to God. And that was tremendous healing for me. Because to not acknowledge a child is the most painful thing when you've been pregnant, right? No matter how long you've been pregnant. That child's body has literally been inside your body. Some cells from that child's body run through your bloodstream for the rest of your life.
Still there,
And we know they're in our hearts. So it's very painful for women to have to pretend it didn't happen because somebody else is uncomfortable.
Well, I know that as far as acknowledgement, I know that Church of the Holy Innocents in New York City will actually email you a certificate of life for any child you just fill out, and I've done that.
I actually wrote the names in the book. My daughters and I took a picture in front of the book of life, and we wrote our children's names in the books, their brothers and one sister, and we wrote their names. It was a very healing acknowledgement. Like you said, society sometimes fails to acknowledge. That's beautiful that you know about that. I'm so glad. It's a beautiful church, by the way, if you ever go there.
Yeah, well, no, and then the other thing that I really love spiritually, I'm Lutheran. The Lutheran church that I belong to is a more conservative congregation, and we still have a rail, and we kneel to take communion. And,
lucky.
It's very nice, and it's circular. It's a half circle, obviously, around the altar. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that the way one time when I was really struggling early on in my grief process, the pastor that we had at that time said, well, contemplate this. You're kneeling at the communion rail that is half around, and the wall with the place where we eat our donuts is on the other side, But contemplate the fact that imagine that half circle that everybody here is kneeling at is continued on the other side of that altar, and all of the saints and everybody that you loved and everybody that you are missing is on the other. I'm sure you've seen the picture of the Catholic Mass where it shows the Mass that people see, and then there's the picture next to it with all the angels and the saints all circling
Absolutely.
around.
And I think about it every time I go to Mass, Sarah, and I picture my children looking down. Sometimes I ask them to sit with me.
And that they're
Kimberly Hahn talked about that in Home Sweet Home. What a comfort that is to mothers who have lost children. That in God's kingdom, they're very much alive. We just can't see it right now, but it's a very much a reality.
Most definitely. And while I know that it's not appropriate to be going to take communion because you are communing with your child, obviously, during the early part in the grieving process, I think that God probably forgave me for that, for the fact that the reason I kept going was that thought that she was just on the other side of that circle. She was just there, and I could just be with her, and just for that split second that we were sitting there, we were sharing, this together, and and I think that when you use a lot of those spiritual tools, I don't want to use tool because when I'm saying spiritual tools, it sounds like I'm talking about it self-help. I don't mean it that way. But those things, I guess, that God has given us can be very healing because it's kind of interesting. Like earlier when I had said something and you apologized for something, I find that it's very easy to talk about these things and to, I did a circuit meeting for pastors a couple of weeks ago where they all sit down and talk, and I answered them questions about the New York Reproductive Health Act and about my daughter, or I've done in-services at pregnancy resource centers and things like that. It's actually very easy for me to talk about all these things without becoming emotional, and I believe that part of that reason is because because I delved so far into the spirituality of everything and what, what God had promised and what the reality was, that I think that it can be very healing in a way that people probably don't realize. I see a lot of people, unfortunately, turn away from faith and religion because they think that God has done something to them. I think God has done something for me.
Really? So what would you say he has done for you through your daughter's life and death?
No, my daughter's life has most definitely, what he's done for me is obviously encased in the crucifixion and the resurrection. Everything centers around that. But just kind of that reminder, the little memento mori, that life is not promised to us. There's no length of time that we're given, that we are told we're going to be here. And some of our lives are going to last 80 years, and some of our lives are going to last an hour and 47 minutes.
That's right.
And we have no way of knowing when it starts out. And that's, number one, that's part of the whole thing with carrying to term. It's not our jobs to decide to author somebody else's life. That's not my job to decide when somebody is going to live and die. Okay, that's not my prerogative. It's not that's not my vocation.
Right.
My vocation is to nurture and care for my children. That's my primary, that's why I'm not going to marches and doing things. My vocation is to care and comfort and nurture my children. That's my vocation in this life right now. It'll change later on at some point, but that's what it is. And but the whole aspect of we are not promised any time.
No.
And that doesn't mean that every day we're going to go out meeting the day with, I have a lot of vest and vim, because there's zest and, because I know everything. I got to make every moment count. Where obviously everybody's going to have bad days, and we're going to. But the overarching theme is to do the best with the time that you have that you can, because we don't know. I could go drive out tomorrow, or I work tonight. I could go drive out tonight and get in a and not be here. But the fact that I'm okay, as strange as it sounds, I would be more sad because I have children that would mourn me.
Of course.
I've learned that those things are acceptable, and because they happen, that doesn't mean that there's a part, Angie Smith wrote a book, I Will Carry You, about the same type of situation. And she said the one thing she remembers being in the doctor's office when she received the diagnosis, she said something along the lines of, somebody asked her what she was thinking at that moment, and she said, my Jesus is the same Jesus he was before I walked in here.
Oh.
And I think that, that's something that's really profound, that, with that thought that we don't have time promised to us and we don't know how long our lives are going to be. But regardless of that, our Jesus is the same Jesus he was before we started had this situation, or before we started this journey. And I think that's the best.
Beautiful thought, Sarah, to share that. For those who believe in the afterlife, or believe in heaven and salvation, there's so much hope. And we're pro-life because we believe, like you said, we're not the author of life, that God is the author of life. It's up to him to decide when our time's up. But we also hope for the future. And I feel so badly for those who don't, especially those who have aborted and don't believe in the afterlife. That's got to be terrible suffering. And so I try to have compassion in my work with them in the pregnancy center and help them to realize, to come to faith and to realize there is forgiveness, there's healing, and there's a life when you may be with your child after life. And so it's not all over, and it's not unforgivable. And so that's the beauty that we can offer, the hope that we can offer. And I do believe that my daughter changed me for the better and my family. She still is. Every day requiring more and more patience and also giving more and more joy at the same time, which is
that's also a gift.
Much we all do for each other, right?
Most definitely.
They just might do it more intensely at times. The joy and the frustration, both.
Yeah. No, I have my, not quite, I have a child with epilepsy, so.
Okay, so you are the special needs mom of 2 children. So you definitely know, right, the extra giving that you have to give and the extra love and the joy in the small things, the small triumphs. And so thank you so much for sharing your
Oh, you're welcome.
Your beautiful vocation of motherhood, your powerful story. I'm sure that a lot of mothers will take comfort in this, and we can allow you to share it with anyone you want, and it will be put up in a couple of weeks on my website, The Gospel of Life. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Have a blessed Easter, and thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye now.
Okay.
And thank you for joining The Gospel of Life.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.